management of food waste to talking about the creation of food waste in the first place. And so Hélène Ste Jacques is a good friend of the Compost Council and our office and has been devoted to helping advance recycling and other forms of waste diversion for many years. Is a well-respected entity in Canada and beyond, and has a passion for the whole issue of food policy, has volunteered on a number of boards, and is spearheading a number of the activities of the Toronto Food Policy Council. And so we're having her here today to talk about food waste in terms of the creation. So Jolene, I don't know if you want to say anything in advance, otherwise we'll just have Hélène start.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment. If we can hold our questions until the end, we'll have a question and answer period. You can either type them in the chat box there, or I can unmute you as well. So if you want to go ahead, you can start the presentation.
Oh, thank you very much, Jolene, and that lovely introduction from Susan. Yes, as Susan indicated, I come at this from two perspectives. The work that I've done over decades on solid waste diversion, recycling, and also from the work that I've done over a long period of time along the food supply network, the chain, and latterly doing a lot of work with local food producers and rebuilding food system. And the pro bono work includes being chair of Toronto Food Policy Council, which is the first food policy council in North America, reporting to public health, and it's civil society, and there's now over 200 in North America. So with this introduction, I will be making comments about solid waste, but food definitely. Let me see. Here, this is the very familiar Darwinian drawing of the evolution of man. There's a fabulous one that, reaching back over the past, if any of you can have access to the one that actually has a human being carrying a blue box, please let me know. Now, here we go. This is the residue of modern civilization as we know it. This is essentially a post-Second World War phenomena with consumerism at the forefront. So this is a very familiar scene for a lot of us, although we know they're capped at night and they don't look like this to most people. So the 3 R's hierarchy was developed, and the initial work, and to date really most of the work and the funding has been focused on the bottom of the pyramid, recycle, for a number of reasons, given that our job was not to in any way alter commercial patterns and consumption, but to solid waste departments were charged with having to deal with this increasing amount of so-called garbage. And from the inception of the Blue Box in Ontario and elsewhere, the Blue Box collection was phenomenally successful, beyond initial planners' expectations. And what we were doing at that point, and we realized through focus groups and measurement surveys, was tapping into people's immense guilt. And the beauty about waste is it's palpable. There it is. There are bags of it in front of your home or in your apartment building day after day. So all the work that we've done indicates recycling has been an immense, there's great psychological benefits that people achieve they feel guilt reduction, and in a way, it's licensed to go out and buy more. So with the evolution of recycling, as you well remember, we started out with the core materials and had to teach people what the materials were. And essentially, we have created a very sophisticated waste management consumer. They are able to sort out now very easily boxboard from corrugated, paper from different types of plastics, what are the right glass elements to go in their blue boxes. And as you see, this sort has seems to segregate, or not that this was required in this program, but this recycler, and some do it this way, they like to keep the different streams separate. And then we reached a point of saying, whoa, we have a lot of green material, a lot of organic material. What are we going to do with it? And some municipalities or regions have been able to introduce these compost collection bins. And these programs vary considerably in terms of what they collect. Maybe at the wide open end, we have a program, for instance, in Toronto that allows people to put in kitchen waste, animal feces, cat litter, I believe, and also compostable diapers and plastic bags. Other collection systems have removed, do not allow plastic, but nonetheless they're collecting this material. And we'll see a little bit later on the economic consequences of that. Now, and you see here, these are really good recyclers. They're in Peel region, and they have one bag of garbage, which in some jurisdictions they have to pay for. There's no free bags. But as you experts in solid waste know, that they're not building any more landfill sites, or I don't think they are. They're certainly not licensing them. But there's more waste that's being generated, and this tends to come from packaging and things that are not recyclable at the moment. Okay. Now what happened was a number of different interests in the food sector particularly, and including student activists, started to dumpster dive. This was very popular in Europe, and it became quite a strong kind of underground political movement called freeganism. And some wonderful work has been done on this, great papers. And if you're interested in a doctoral thesis about it, I'd be very happy to send it to you. But this is not an atypical view looking into a dumpster from a retailer. So there you see there's a lot of edible food there. For one reason or another, it's being tossed out, and some of it's in packaging, but most of it isn't. That's the one thing about produce. It tends to be largely unpackaged, and this certainly has implications for any waste comp audits that are done trying to isolate food waste and define it, what it is, what categories it fits into. But here we go. So what this served was actually free shopping for a lot of people. The brave, the dumpster divers, who made a lot of videos, they had parties, they went viral. They're student movements and among young millennials who are quite into this, not for the faint of heart. So analysis is being done. Now, I hasten to add that the data in Canada is emerging. It's not nearly as well documented yet as it is in the UK, for instance, under the WRAP initiative, which was launched in the early 2000s, I believe. Prime Minister Tony Blair was pushed by many, including Jamie Oliver, to start investing in this. And it's a multi-sectoral protocol that was developed, the Quartile Protocol, and they have spent a lot of money analyzing food waste. And we're talking about edible food waste here. But here's what we've got, and this is the kind of data that we tend to be using at the moment. So in Canada, approximately 172 kilos per capita per annum, and this is retail and consumer, is wasted, or edible. And that comes out to $28 per week for an average family, and that is 2.1 members. So here we have, say, $1,500 a year. Now that amount of money, these averages are average, could be more for some households than others. And now this is being studied to look at patterns within certain cultural communities, because it appears that some cultures place very high value in food and cooking skills, and therefore translates into less waste. Stats Canada says we are wasting in total 1.2 to 2 billion tons a year. That's quite a spread. But overall, the Value Change Management Center at University of Guelph puts an estimate of 27 billion. And internationally, you'll see the figure below, a little bit lower, well, quite a bit lower per capita. This is Europe and North America. In Europe, the food waste is not inconsiderable, but it appears to be a little bit lower for a whole series of cultural and potentially pricing and urban design features, i.e. people have more access to a lot of little local stores. And the UN Food and Agriculture Organization is guesstimating 1.3 billion tons per year. So that's a lot of food, edible food that's being wasted. Now, the reason that organizations such as the UN FAO are interested in this, and others, is given that with our 7 billion population that's rapidly expanding, there has been a real push on agriculture to boost productivity or boost yields. How are we going to feed the added billions of people? Well, from these estimates, they're saying at least 1 billion more new humans could be fed, given the production volumes now, if we didn't waste so much food. This is a very interesting and somewhat shocking distribution model of food waste and how it's distributed along the value chain. And look to the left here. This is really shocking, I think. 51% of the food, edible food that's wasted, comes out of our homes. And then looking down, packaging, processing, 18%, retail stores, 11, and at the production end, that is growers 9%. Now, I'd like to explain that one of the reasons that this is happening is that growers aren't saying, oh, can't be bothered harvesting that. It is because of the standards, the regulations that are set governing acceptable produce. So those curly cucumbers or those stunted carrots, those tiny apples or those very big peaches will never come onto the consumer shelf because they do not fulfill cosmetic criteria. And I underscore that it is cosmetic criteria that governs this. And we see food service and restaurants is 8%. And again, that fluctuates a lot depending on the kind of outlet. So half of it, my gosh, comes out of our own homes. That was what really set us thinking what could be done here. And usually the principle is to go for the low-hanging fruit, so we're going to focus on homes, residences. This is some data that Toronto Solid Waste kindly shared with me, and they looked at this analysis and approved it. And it shows audits in terms of waste for multi-res or multi-family and the curbside collection. And what we've got here is, please have a look down at food waste. So a little bit of difference between multi-res and curbside, but essentially 1/3 is food waste. I hasten to add here, there was no attempt to then take that food waste apart and analyze it. What was carrots, what were the carrot tops? But this is an indication, as you all know, that food waste in one form or another is not insignificant in the waste stream. And the other organics could be disposable diapers, animal feces, etc. And then other materials. So 1/3. Okay, that's a lot. York Region adopted under the Smart Living strategy a couple of years ago the umbrella concept of sustainability, creating a sustainable community, and this has all sorts of threads to it. But they have been looking very closely at food waste and did an audit, and you'll see at the bottom the categories. These categories tend to have been developed under the RAP initiative, again in the UK, and seem to work well here with some minor changes. So there's produce, meat, fish, dairy, eggs, cereals, grains, and other. So that's University of Guelph has been using these criteria in the work they're doing in a southern Ontario city and in Guelph. So the audit that York Region did last year indicated that 55% of the waste stream was, we're talking edible food here now, vegetables. Leftovers, 1/3. Now, the leftovers, these again are averages, but from the work that's been done in the States by the NRDC and others, that's the National Research Defense Council, discovered that a lot of people don't like leftovers, or they forget them in the back of the fridge. They just don't know how to heat them or how to use them. and make them into something that's palatable. And then next we have plate scraping. So sometimes our eyes are bigger than our stomach, and we heap things on our plates, and then we don't want to eat it. That's the stuff that our mothers may have told us, that if we didn't eat, we should be thinking of starving people. Spoiled produce, 8%. Best before date. Now this figure is a little bit low, but what we're talking about here is the dates that are placed by manufacturers on food containers, essentially as instructions for retailers to rotate or to special something, get rid of it fast. For instance, yogurts, often the best before dates would be within a 3 to 4 week period, when in fact there's nothing the matter with it. You could eat it 6 or 7 weeks. Now, I am not a dietitian or a public health person, and so I can say this. Some people say give it the sniff test, and if it doesn't have mold, it's not mushy, go ahead and eat it. And then at the very bottom we have animal bones and meat, but probably there's a lot of animal or protein in the plate scrapings. So that gives you a sense of it. Now, why all this edible food waste? To your right is the beauty shot. Retailers like to put their best foot forward, and this is like food porn. You walk into a supermarket and, oh, it looks so wonderful and inviting. It's just begging for you to buy it. So, and often they encourage us to buy a lot with sales. Price Chopper is just one that have been forced into a big race with retailers, many of them fighting over the lowest price, everyday value, and they're encouraging us to buy volume. Okay. Now this is in psychological terms, from the work that I've done over the years in social marketing, issues sometimes just are not on people's radar. They're just not aware of the obvious. I think laterally just thinking about water and the amount of water we consume, which is second highest in the world after the States. Even those states like California that have severe water shortages. So here you see this question that was posed by the Conference Board of Canada to an online panel last year. These were food shoppers. On average, how many grocery bags of food that you buy each week do you end up throwing out? Well, 11% fessed up and said 2 bags. 23% 1 bag. And voila, we have 2/3 who said no food waste. And you know from the work that you do that that's not really the case. There's also, and some of you may really want to challenge me on this one, is low prices. But in North America, it's a political fact that we have low food price policies. Unlike Europe, where people will spend a quarter, a third of their income on food, priced quite differently. Some people have called our approach a race to the bottom. But now that we have the freedom through cheap transportation to access food from around the world, retailers can buy the cheapest whatever from wherever. Transportation is a minor part of the cost. There's also high volume retailers very large format stores. We tend to be in the practice of doing the big shop every week or two, loading up, and I add storage there. Fridges seem to be getting bigger and bigger, and necessarily, unless we're really good at organizing our fridges and move older things that need to be eaten to the front and the new things in the back, we just keep stuffing things into our fridge and discovering them too late. There's also the function of time, and with longer commutes, people being very, very busy, there's just, food should be convenient, and it should be made very easy and fast, and that's where we are now. It's also a time where some decades ago women fled the kitchen, and good, but also in some societies did not want to learn how to cook, so low food skills. And hence this phenomena that we're seeing now of community groups espousing canning and all sorts of new, kind of old, everything old is new again, relearning these skills. And I make note here that York Region and City of Guelph, in tandem with University of Guelph, are studying these patterns in more depth through quantitative and qualitative research. So composting has been, and please pardon me for this unsophisticated view of composting, but that was my first look at large-scale composting. Pretty impressive. Composting is a solution, absolutely. It provides nutrients for the soil. Our soil qualities are very poor, and we need to be amending them. And it takes pressure off landfill, but it's costly. So some new food waste reduction advocates are positing food waste 5 R's. So right at the very top you see is reduction. Reduce whatever you can. Therefore change your shopping habits, learn how to cook, etc., etc. But if you must throw it out, reuse it. And with reuse programs, we have wonderful organizations such as Second Harvest in Toronto and elsewhere across the country. They are gathering both from manufacturers and from retailers, from food service, high volumes of food that then are directed to people who are in need, the food insecure, and those numbers, unfortunately, are growing quite rapidly. And then down the hierarchy, recycle and compost. They're a good solution. And we wish more people would backyard compost if they have a backyard. Then fourth is waste to energy. And very finally, if none of these steps can be utilized, landfill. So my point today, and when I speak about this with solid waste management people, is to say this is not a burden. This food waste reduction, edible food waste, is not a burden, a new burden for solid waste. You have enough things to deal with. I understand totally your mandate, your funding, and the Waste Diversion Act, certainly in Ontario and elsewhere. There are many groups that are very interested in working with their constituents on messaging and taking corrective action. And you could probably add to this list, but there's local food advocates and local farmers, that is farmers who are feeding local people with through farmers markets, for instance, for CSAs. Public health departments have become very interested in this, given that all the studies that are showing poor nutrition is often linked directly with lack of consumption of fresh fruit and vegetables. There's environmental people who are focused on the water, air, and soil that are lost with the waste of edible food. So all these very precious resources are going to naught. There's food security organizations now. We're somewhere 17% of the population is food insecure. That is, they experience hunger at least once a month. Faith groups. Some faith groups have taken this on very seriously, and I call it kind of eco-theology. They're tying human behavior in with the health of the planet. There are educators and schools in Ontario and elsewhere. New food literacy programs are developing to teach children the life cycle of growing, food preparing, eating it, and then composting the residue, growing. So it's the virtuous cycle. There are consumer groups that say, hey, we could be saving money. Imagine that $28 a week if you had to spend it on other good things, maybe a better quality food. Maybe you might spend it on local, that it costs a little bit more sometimes than the cheap imports. Corporations, just like the introduction of recycling, corporations very smartly started to realize if we're bringing it in the back front door, we're paying for it and paying for it to go into waste out the back. We've got a flawed model here. How can we produce without creating so much waste? And then laterally, there's the solid waste industry. So in the case of Toronto, the Toronto Food Policy Council, and I put this out as only an example. There are many others. We propose to sit down with representatives of these various groups and others with solid waste management to talk about potential ways that we each can do to address this problem. And we're looking at potentially new strategies, new skills, skilling up people, teaching people how to shop smarter and save $28 a week. And also what is avoidable and what is unavoidable. That, you know, that wizened carrot, those vegetables that look a little bit beyond the pale, they would make a very nice stew or sauce. And also look at it from an environmental perspective. And on the supply chain, some corrective steps need to be taken, relabeling, food labeling that is very confusing, sends out the wrong signals, and new retail practices. So I'd like to end this part of the webinar with Malcolm Gladwell, The Tipping Point. That's all kind of in our lexicon now, the tipping point, the moment of critical mass, the threshold, the boiling point. Ideas and products and messages and behaviors spread like viruses do. Well, we hope it's the tipping point and the point for change for food waste reduction. And now, before I look forward to answering your questions or any comments, we like to play a very clever campaign that has been running by Intermarché in France. And you'll see how smart they are. Yeah, Jim's going to help me here. Thank you. So here is what they have done with those, what they call the inglorious ones. Those things that you don't usually see at retail.
Lemon, the disfigured eggplant, the ugly carrot, and the unfortunate clementine. Now, you can eat 5 inglorious fruits and vegetables a day. As good, but 30% cheaper. How did we do it? We bought from our growers the products they usually throw away and sold them in stores. They got their own aisle, their own labelings, and their own spot on the sales receipt. For people to realize that they were just as good as the others, we designed and distributed inglorious vegetable soups and inglorious fruit juices. And it worked. Our new kind of fruits and vegetables were an immediate success. We faced only one problem, being sold out. 1.2 times the average sale per store during the first 2 days, plus 24% overall store traffic. This initiative increased awareness about food waste. It created a lot of conversation in social networks. Over 13 million people reached after 1 month, and had a big impact in the media. Finally, journalists suggested that every supermarket in the country should do that.
Et moi, je milite pour que ça continue, que ça soit dans tous les supermarchés.
Bonne idée. The inglorious fruits and vegetables. A glorious fight against food waste.
Oh, thank you so much, Jim. I apologize for those of you, I'm sure you all had a bit of difficulty hearing me on occasion because I would move back from the mic. I'm looking forward to your questions or comments.
Thanks very much, Hélène. So if anybody has any questions, they will go through Jolene, and Jolene will raise it with Hélène.
Yes, thank you for your presentation there, Hélène. Lots of good stats and stuff. If anyone would like to make any comments on any of the topics or questions.
I have a question in terms of the, you're very tied in with the Toronto Food Policy Council. What is the network across the country for the Toronto Food Policy Council to be networked across the country?
Oh, yes. Thank you. That's a good question. There are, one of the large kind of umbrella organizations is called Food Secure Canada. And Food Secure Canada has developed a policy, a food policy for Canada. Given that we're in this strange position here, a vacuum. Canada does not have a food policy. Oh, what does that mean? That means, well, if there's no policy, there's no programs, there's no funding. We've left it up to the industrial food sector, basically. So a lot of organizations link with FoodShare and Toronto Food Policy Council through Food Secure Canada. But I think locally, all cities have a local food group under different names. I hope that helps.
Okay. The next question is a rather long question, so I'm going to try my best to make it as clear as possible. And it's from actually Addis at Green Manitoba here. She's saying there could be a possible controversy around the use of food waste to produce/generate energy and then use that energy to produce food or anything else, which is being practiced successfully in many places. Thus, this reduces the use of other energy and resources that are consuming carbon and emitting technologies, carbon-emitting technologies to produce food. So how do you reconcile the current emphasis on the reduction of food waste versus the resulting lost opportunity to produce energy from food waste?
Oh, goodness. They get you coming and going, don't they? Unintended consequences. Okay. Now, I'm going to be, first of all, we have a known population, at least 17%, we'll say 1 in 5 are food secure. That is, they are hungry. They do not have an adequate diet. This should be a great interest to Canada that has universal health care system. And this is something that all of us pay for through taxation. And there's direct evidence to show that if you don't have money, you cannot eat healthily. And chances are your health suffers and you cost more to the system. So I suggest you read a book, if you're interested, by Raj Patel, P-A-T-E-L. He's based in San Francisco. He's worked for the World Bank. He has a PhD in economics. And he knows his stuff, and it's called Stuffed and Starved. And it looks at this anomalous situation that's played out around the world with about 1 billion people are starving. They're malnourished, and 1 million people, 1 billion, pardon me, are obese or overweight. So I look at it from that framework. Now, from an energy perspective, it has been said that we're fossil fuel based, and our society, our economy is based on this system with very little attention to conservation and strong price signals that the Europe, for instance, uses to reduce the load on energy requirements. So how do we square that? I mean, we're talking about two different things. But the other thing is when we are growing food, we are also using vast amounts of energy that is for the creation of these artificial fertilizers, pesticides, the equipment, etc., etc. So that is a waste of energy. We're not really planning our energy usage very well in this country. We're driven to fossil fuel and with little else. So does that help answer the question? Or it just deepens the debate, which I don't mind doing.
Yeah, that definitely does answer the question. Is that, yeah, I guess what's the energy loss, and can it be defined, you know, in these life cycle analysis? How much energy is lost through the use of using food waste as a resource for energy? And
I'm asking this because I don't know. Is it a good source of energy, food waste?
Well, I guess in terms of for us, because we embrace both composting and anaerobic digestion, certain forms of materials that go to our organics recycling facilities are better suited for anaerobic digestion, and others are better suited for composting. So when I saw the R's, I think in terms of perhaps it does need to be a little bit modified to reflect the fact that on that third level, we as the organics recyclers can accommodate energy in that we deliver energy through anaerobic digestion facilities before it gets into the burning aspect, because that's one of the controversies right now. The energy from waste, what does that mean? Where does it fit in? So definitely certain like fats, oils, and grease, perfect, excellent to go right to the anaerobic digestion facility. Not so great for compost facilities.
Oh, well, thank you. Then I think we should amend our 5 R's here. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
All right. Is there any other questions or comments that people have?
I have one, and that is a thank you, a double-fold thank you. One to Hélène Ste Jacques, who, given her schedule and the like, we would not normally be able to have access to the quality of a presenter and the knowledge base that we get through Hélène. And that ties in with Green Manitoba's support of these webinars. The whole concept of the webinars is that there are many folks that we just cannot ask of their time to come to one of our regional workshops or our national conference, but they're willing to give, and they do so on a voluntary basis through the support of Green Manitoba to give of their time. So thank you to both Green Manitoba as well as Hélène, because it's a privilege, and I think it's very important that the Compost Council is part of the continuum. You know, one of the biggest things for me is that at one point there's a chap in the U.S. that links landfill and composting the same thing. That's just both are dirty words, and quite honestly, it's not the case in terms of from the composting perspective. We have more than enough organics that we're not even capturing. Let's make sure that they're not wasted in the first place, and if they do end up in a green bin, that they're well used and returned to the soil. So the other thing is that, again, one of our partners is the Municipal Waste Association. We're co-partnering on the Certified Compostable Committee, and they have taken the initiative to have a working group on food waste. Hélène is part of that, and so we would encourage our members to also keep an eye, and through our partnership and strategic alliance with NWA, we will keep you informed.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Susan. And I did want to say that the work that we're doing at NWA, this working group, believe me, we're not running, we're crawling, because most solid waste management departments are still looking at this issue somewhat from a distance. There's no funding for it, and it seems to be, and necessarily it's outside of your jurisdiction. All of your efforts, your mandate has been to divert, not to reduce. And this is a really odd bod, if you will, this food waste reduction. But MWA is looking at it. We've got a working group, and we're sharing any information that comes to us, and it's slowly gaining energy, but most solid waste departments do not have a policy on this yet. So it's early days. It's always a pleasure, though, to be working on these issues, and with Susan and Compost Council of Canada. I'm absolutely delighted that we can have this dialogue, and look forward to hearing from you. Please send me an email. I'm also online at www.informaresearch.com. I'm a peripatetic blogger. I tend to be very cautious about saying anything unless I've got lots of data behind me. But it's been a real pleasure to have this opportunity today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jolene. We'll let you say goodbye.
There is actually a few more questions here, if you don't mind.
Oh, hooray.
So as we're on the topic of, this information sharing, the question from Sylvie Hebert from Green Action Center is, what was the initiative in the UK that you're talking about? I believe you said RAP?
Yes.
What does that stand for?
WRAP, if you input that, the RAP protocol. They just make us so envious here. The amount of money they've spent in analyzing food waste, edible food waste, and also beverages. And then they introduced a number of programs, kind of multi-level, both Love Food and Hate Waste was their public education program. And they have also built up a lot of strength around their composting. But they induced participating retailers to get involved, who did really interesting things, and not to the detriment of their bottom line. This is kind of counterintuitive. But for instance, you walk into the produce department, and if you buy 2 2 nice little plastic containers of strawberries or blueberries now. They're doing 2 for $5. And you look at it and you think, well, gee, that's a great deal. And yet you buy them. Well, if part of you is saying, how am I going to eat these before they go to waste? In the UK, you get a rain check. So you get one of them, and then the next time you go shopping, you can collect the other one. And what they found is retailers who are not pushing so much onto consumers, at the store level, they have less food waste. The amount of money that it costs retailers to bring the stuff in, to display it, rotate it, then purge it, it goes out the back door. It costs them a lot of money. They make more by selling less. So, wrap. And if you have difficulty, please send me an email, and I'll send them to you. I'll link you up.
That's actually quite interesting and kind of leads into the other question from Sylvie. And she's asking, are actions that are actually encouraging food waste in Canada? And if there are, is there any that you can share?
Are there, I'm sorry, what was that way? Retailers?
No,
that
any
are
regulations.
Food waste?
Any
regulations.
Any regulations that encourage food waste. Things that are actually prohibitive to reducing food waste.
I would say the absence of regulations is more like it. I mean, we just, we have a blindness, cognitive blindness, blind spot towards this. This is not federal government policy. We don't look at that. The province hasn't looked at it yet, although the Ontario Environmental Commissioner, in his 2013 report called Losing the Edge, he identified, Gordon Miller, identified this as something of great interest that we should be moving on. So, no, I don't know that there are any, actually. Although you could say the absence or the lack of clarity around best before dates and so-called expiry dates is feeding into it. I hope that helps.
Yes. I was actually really surprised that only 8% was attributed to best before dates. I thought it would be a lot higher.
Yes, 8%. What was that figure? I'm sorry, that's York Region's data on best before. Yes. Well, I'm wondering, you know, that's a very good question, because doing these audits, waste audits themselves are not cheap things to do. And then the further food waste audit, I'm wondering, and I will ask, if this also includes going through garbage bags, because some of the people who are doing audits in other jurisdictions are finding that yogurt, for instance, people...
Oh, I'm having some difficulty hearing. Is anyone else having some difficulty hearing, or is it just me?
Is it me that keeps drawing back?
I can hear you again. It just went really fuzzy there.
Oh, okay.
But you're back?
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm just going to quickly ask the last question we have here. And it's from Dennis Monester from Ontario. And he says, seeing as though 50% of food waste comes directly from the consumer, Do you believe that ineffective and non-functional containers could dissuade households from participating in an organics program? For example, in the city of Toronto, raccoons pose a huge issue by getting into curbside containers and cause a tremendous mess. As a resident, if you had to clean this up on a regular basis, would that prevent your participation?
Ooh.
So is that one of the issues that
That's contributing to food waste?
Mm-hmm.
That would go in, presumably then, if you're having trouble with your green bin, then you just dump it all in the garbage, right?
Right.
Those raccoons. Well.
And is there something being, like, is there improvements in bins, or is it an education issue?
I guess in terms of the Compost Council embraces all forms of composting, and if you have a green bin, it's likely that you have a single-family household, which means that it's likely that you would have space in your backyard for a backyard compost bin. And so from a transportation perspective and the whole issue in terms of environment, you know, making sure that you manage those resources in-house as much as possible is the best thing from an environmental perspective. Green bin programs are certainly there to provide convenience and allow for folks to recycle their organics, but there's nothing better than a backyard compost bin in terms of managing the program yourself.
That's right. Now, I don't know. I'm right in the heart of the city, and yes, the raccoons have been a challenge, but there's certainly pretty easy ways around that I have discovered. And it's not an extra latch. I just hang it off the fence, basically, and they can't seem to get at it. They try mightily. So I don't think that that is the huge problem that it was at the outset, or the City of Toronto, and please do correct me if I'm wrong here, the City of Toronto would have taken corrective action. I don't hear much about that problem at all. But I could be wrong.
Mm-hmm. It definitely could be one of the reasons why people are not participating. But what I have read is that a lot of education goes a long way as well.
Well, this is
getting
true,
people involved.
But I think it's important to look at Toronto overall, as about half of households are multi-res. So they don't have green bins, that is individual households, if they have access to organic collection, and they're rapidly coming on stream and doing so. They are kind of centrally using a green bin, a large green dumpster or something like that. Mm-hmm. And only half of the other households actually are curbside. So, and the curbside issue around the raccoons, I think, has been pretty well addressed, to my knowledge. Well, thank you, Susan, thank you, Jolene, and thank you, everyone who has checked in today. I'd love to hear from you. And
okay.
Wish you a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.